In your HTML, you just need one element. And React is going to replace that element. So usually you see people just give this, make this a div with an ID. But it could also be something as simple as just a main element like this. And that's your entire HTML. It just needs to be something that you can select with a selector. Now in JavaScript, you need to include a couple of things. You need to include React itself, and you need to include React DOM. Because React actually can be used to build native apps as well with React Native. And you'll use the same React library for either one. But you will use React DOM when you're dealing with the web. Now in CodePen, this is pretty easy to do. Here. If we go to settings here, you see that you can include external JavaScript if you want, including some external ones. You could paste in a URL, or you'll see there's a quick add here. So let's quick add React. There we go. It goes to CD and JS of all things. And let's quick add React DOM. Now, the way React works, you use something kind of like createElement, like document.createElement, except it's react.createElement. And you end up with a very similar mess of creating elements and messing with them. But it turns out they recognize that that's a pain in the neck, and they introduced something called JSX, which, strictly speaking, is not real JavaScript. It's JavaScript with some XML-looking things mixed in. Kind of weird. Browsers don't support it natively, but pretty much everyone writes React this way, and we're going to too, because the other way it just isn't very fun, and we kind of misses the point of how easy React can be. So we need to use JSX, and to do that, again, the browser can't interpret it natively, so what we have to do is use a JavaScript preprocessor to turn it into old school JavaScript. So it's basically going to take all of our JSX and turn it into a bunch of React.createElements. So we need a JavaScript preprocessor called Babel. Babel also does some other nice things. It can, for example, turn modern JavaScript into old JavaScript. So you could write using all the ES 2017 features you want, and it will compile it down to, heck, ES5 if you want, even though all the browsers that are currently widely used support ES6 fine. But there are features that are newer than that, too. So we need to use Babel. All right, very good. So at the most basic, we need some React component. I'm just going to hide the HTML because that's all we're going to put there. So to make a React component, we'll make a class. And I'm going to call it app. Now in this case, our class is actually going to inherit from something. So the keyword in JavaScript for that is extends. So class app extends, and then the class that you're inheriting from, which is going to be React.component. So this React variable is available to us because we added it in our settings on CodePen. And then inside your component, you need to have at least one method called render, which tells it what UI to build on the page. And then you use JSX inside your render function. Your render function just needs to return a React element. But you don't have to use the JavaScript to do that. You can use JSX, and JSX looks an awful lot like HTML. Reactrobats. Looks an awful lot like HTML. we'll just return that. Only other thing you have to do is tell React DOM to put this on the page. We need to actually render this component. For that, we call React DOM, which again is available because we included it up in our settings. React DOM.render. And then we tell it some JSX to render. So this is an H1. But when we create a component, we can use that component using JSX the same way. So you're basically writing custom elements. So I can render app like that. I've just created essentially a custom app tag. Now, you know some elements are empty, right? You don't put anything in them, like input. You don't have a closing tag for input. In this case, JSX is more like XML than it is like HTML, so everything has to have a closing tag. But if it's empty, you can make it a self-closing tag. There was a while in the mid-2000s when we were writing XHTML, which was just HTML as well-formed XML to oversimplify, which meant that you had to do things like self-closing tags. And with something like an input, it looked like this. You just put a / before the closing angle bracket. So again, we're using XML syntax here. So we could just do this. And people always do. If you're not putting anything in between the tags, just do that. Self-closing tag for our app component. So now we just need to tell React DOM where to render this component. So we just need to grab document.querySelector. And the one thing we put in there, which was just a main element. So that'll work. Lo and behold, our H1's on the page. You should only need that React DOM.render line one time for your entire app. To just tell it to put your main component, whatever that is, in our case, app. And that's the only time you should have to interact with the DOM at all. We just grab one element on the page and tell React DOM to replace that element with our entire app. Never need to mess with the DOM again. So there you go. That's a React thing. That's our hello world with React. But it is pretty dull right now. So we'll make it do some stuff. We'll make it do some stuff not unlike what we've been doing with vanilla JavaScript.